I recently shared an article with the session about a Presbyterian church in Minnesota. The congregation there had been floundering and decided that they would take a risk by making Sabbath keeping a core part of their identity. They decided that they would practice Sabbath keeping by not having worship every Sunday morning. 2 Sundays a month, there would be Lord's Day worship. But on the other 2 Sundays, there wouldn't be. Instead, the night before, there would be an informal worship service on the Saturday night. And everyone in the congregation was given permission to observe the Sabbath the next day and take it as a day of rest. When I first read that, it sounded strange to me. It sounded odd to me, as I'm sure it sounds odd to you. And some of the reason that it sounded so odd is because we aren't very good at keeping the Sabbath. As Christians, we may bicker over bits of Scripture with one another, but rarely would we ever think about calling someone out for breaking the Sabbath. I mean, if you think about it, it really is one of the most well-known rules from the Bible. I'm pretty sure it's in the 10 Commandments there, right? But we either ignore it or we make excuses because we need to do the laundry, or the dishes have to get washed and put away, or I need to run that errand to get that one battery from the store. Or we just make the biggest excuse that I don't have the time for it. But we aren't the only ones who suffer in our failings to keep Sabbath. We heard a part of Leviticus today that I'm sure that all of you are exceptionally familiar with, right? No, we don't hear too much from Leviticus. It's mostly rules and regulations, and sometimes they're hard to hear because they come from a different land in a different time. And so we have trouble with it. But we can follow the intent, the reasoning behind it, because we have been chosen and marked as God's own, and we are supposed to live as transformed people. So we have to look hard at times at some of these parts of the Bible that don't easily reflect the world that we live in, to see what the underlying message for us today is. So our reading today comes from a portion of Leviticus that is called the Holiness Code. It's called the Holiness Code because holy is repeated a lot. We heard it a few times. And so today we heard about something which we probably haven't heard before, which is the Sabbath year and a Jubilee year. These were special years that were set apart to help to restore equality among the people. Debts would be forgiven, slaves would be freed, land that had been sold would be returned to its original owners. It was a way of resetting the society to make everyone equal again. And these sound like wonderful practices that would work to prevent the people from sinking too far into poverty. The mismanagement of money by parents wouldn't forever hold down their descendants. And those who had more would sacrifice some of what they had, not just for the greater good, but for God, so that the community could still thrive. And the reason for all of this is pretty simple. The ancient Israelites didn't own the land. The land was God's. And the people in the land only as tenants. Now, I have some experience being a tenant. I know what it's like to rent. My home is rented. My home is still my home, but I don't own it. So that means I can't just do whatever I want. So if I wanted to paint one wall black and one wall blue, I'd have to ask first. If I wanted to put an air conditioner in the window so that my family could be comfortable in the summer, I would have to ask first. It's my home, but I don't have complete control over it. And that is the relationship that the people have with the land. They are only tenants. The land is God's. So it shouldn't come as a big surprise that the command to keep the Sabbath year, and the Jubilee year extended to more than just the people, but to all of God's creation. When the people aren't working the land, when they aren't exploiting the land is resting. Unfortunately, there is no sign or record of a Sabbath year or a Jubilee year occurring. But it helps us understand how our call to love and serve others is connected to our call to love and serve God's creation. These were things that were not apart from one another. In the command to celebrate the Sabbath year, the land rests while people are restored. In many of the promises that we hear about what is to come in the Bible, it is not only us who is restored, but creation. All of creation is restored. The message that we hear from the Bible is very clear. Creation is important to our Creator. As you may have known, Friday was Earth Day. It is a day where the secular meets the sacred. And it helps us be reminded that we are to care for God's creation. Now, it doesn't matter if you believe that global warming or that global warming is some sort of fabricated hoax. Because we are supposed to live as tenants on God's land. And we are supposed to make sure that creation gets the same rest that we do. The question then becomes, how can we live as good tenants, honoring our God while we live in our home called creation? It is very difficult for us to not use the land in this global economy. But one of the ways that we can honor the land and give it some rest is to not always get the newest, shiniest of toys. One of the things that always shocks me every year is the people that camp out to buy the new iPhone to replace the new iPhone that they got the year before while camping out. It's our consumerism, our desire for stuff, for wanting things that puts a strain on the world, on God's creation. So I hope that by now you have all heard about the 3 R's. Reduce, reuse, and recycle. Those are all nice words, but they aren't any theological words that I know. You're not going to find them in the Bible. So perhaps it's better for us to move to the next letter of the alphabet, where we can find a word that fits, a word that works. And that word is sacrifice. Sacrifice is worship. Sacrifice means intentionally giving up something as an offering to God. It is an intentional act of love. I don't know if you realize this or not today, but you all made a sacrifice to God by not having a bulletin. It might have made you a little bit uncomfortable. We're so used to having those pieces of paper in our hands to tell us what to do next. But you all know how our worship works. It was a small change that saved about 30 pieces of paper, a little bit of toner, and a little bit of electricity. And it may seem like a small amount, because it is. But it's a symbol of what we can do. It's a symbol of what is possible for us. How we can be mindful in our lives. How we can make these small sacrifices which add up. And so for us, this isn't simply a call for us to go out and recycle more, or a call for us to reuse something more. But it's a call for us to be mindful of what we are doing. It's a call for us to remember that when we gather the recycling and put it out to be recycled, we are offering a sacrifice of our time, no matter how brief. When we decide that we can wait in getting something, or get something that has been used rather than something is new, that is a sacrifice, and that is worship. This is a call for us to be mindful of who we are, how we live our lives. Because we can make these small changes in our life and be worshiping God in new ways and in new moments in our life where we didn't expect it. Whoever thought that taking out the recycling could be worship? But it is. Using less can be worship. Well, we may not be able to give the land the rest that God calls us to give it. We can make sacrifices of our time, sacrifices of our desires, of our wants, and the things that we think are needs. They might be small inconveniences, like not having a bulletin. But they speak to who our God is and who our God calls us to be. It is going to make us uncomfortable, but it's worth it. It's worth it to know that we are worshiping all the time and in new and old ways. The one thing that becomes clear in all of this is that taking care of creation is one of the many ways that we honor our God. So sacrifice. Sacrifice our desires, our wants, to our God, so that we can do our small parts to take care of God's great creation.